All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, and the public notice published by the Secretary of State, this in-person open meeting of the Commission on State Emergency Communications is hereby called to order on July 30th, 2025 at 10 a.m. All right. Kenny, we on track so far? Good. We haven't messed anything up. Our first order of business is to certify that we have a quorum. All quorum or commissioners are present with the exception of Clinton Sawyer and Chip Van Steenberg. At this time, do I have a motion to excuse those commissioners who are unable to attend? There's a motion. Is there a second?
Scuro seconds.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. And we will move on to future meeting dates.
Good morning. So right now we currently have locked in for the next meeting of September 24th. So please check your calendars and get with Karen if that date does not work. And then from there, we're still trying to track down a November date.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, at this time, we will open up our meeting for public comment on open agenda items. If anyone wishes to comment, you're welcome to do so at this time. If you have a particular agenda item, you can wait until that item is called. Otherwise, at this time, we will open it up. And I do believe we have one person, Jim Reed, who would like to come forward and address us. Mr. Reed, welcome.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She kept me in line when she was at SitCog. Now she's keeping me in line, making me right here. I'll repeat myself. My name is Jim Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the Central Texas Council of Governments, and we're a proud partner of CSEC currently. We are in the process of creating a 911 district, and that process will probably play out before your next commission meeting. So since we have been with you since your inception, I felt that it was only proper for me to come forward and to thank you for the decades of partnership with CSEC and SitCog. We've been through a lot of things together, from 911 to E911 to wireless phase 2 to text to 911 to next gen 911, and why I know all those terms after 30 plus years, I don't know, but you know, some of my colleagues have joked that we're getting a divorce, and I said that's the ending of a relationship. We look at this as a graduation. You all have prepared us to be a district. We appreciate that. We look forward to continued relationship with you. We look forward to continued partnership with you. And I wanted just to say a special thank you, Andrew, to you and your staff for preparing us for this day. And I thank the Commission for your thoughtful consideration of our items on the agenda today. And we wish you the best of luck. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you and for the partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. All right. At this time, or is there anyone else wishing to speak? If not, we'll move on in our agenda. And the first item is the agency operations report from Andrew.
Good morning. So I have two items, which is our legislative update as well as our key performance measures for the quarter. Generally speaking, CSEC came out of the 89th legislative session in a better position than it had started. Both of the agency's 911 related exceptional items were adopted, increasing the 911 program budget by almost $5.5 million over the budget. Unfortunately, the exceptional item for our poison control program did not get accepted, but we were able to move funds within our program and admin strategies to deliver extra funding to the poison centers. Separate from funding, the legislature passed a dozen or so bills that will impact general agency operations, and staff will work to implement them over the next few months. Of note, HB 12, so I'm going to just run through these here just so everyone kind of has an idea of what we're talking about here. HB 12 requires the state auditor to conduct efficiency audits of agencies to determine whether state resources are used effectively and efficiently to achieve the desired outcome for program beneficiaries. Coincidentally, CSEC was notified that the SAO has us on the list for an efficiency audit in FY27. So it sounds like we're going to be one of the first to undergo this new program, so that'll be exciting. SB 14 reforms the procedure by which state agencies adopt rules and impose regulatory requirements, and the deference given to the interpretation of laws and rules by state agencies in certain judicial procedures. HB 4219 requires CSAC to notify a requester in writing within 10 days after the request is received that the agency has no information responsible to a public information request. HB 4310 enhances governance transparency by ensuring members of governing boards have prompt, cost-free access to public information needed for oversight. So this one's actually y'all's. You have access to anything or everything you need from CSAC, which we didn't need legislation to do that for us, but... HB 5195 requires the agency to assess and improve their website and service portals. I'm actually pretty excited about this one. For those that may have used CSAC's website, it is functional but not intuitive. So this bill actually mandates us to update our website, and we're excited to do that project over the next biennium. SB 765 closes the gap in public information law by excluding fraud detection and deterrence measures from open records requests. We have one that's actually somewhat specific to our poison control program. SB 1188 requires the agency to implement reasonable and appropriate administrative, physical, and technical safeguards to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic health record information. On the AI front, we have HB 3512, which adds AI literacy training to the annual cybersecurity training requirements for employees and commissioners. So in addition to your cybersecurity, you'll be doing an AI literacy course. Yeah. Things to look forward to.
Are you sure that passed? Uh-oh.
And then we have SB 1964, which requires DIR to establish an AI system code of ethics for use by state agencies and local governments that procure, develop, deploy, or use AI systems. So those are some of the things that we'll be working on over the next biennium to implement and adopt across the agency. Again, a lot of those don't necessarily have anything to do with program operations, but things that the agency has to implement. Any questions before I move on? All right. Next up is third quarter performance measures. First off, I really want to highlight the one that we had the most change on, which is actually the number of current InfoSec assessments that the COGS have done. So as everybody remembers, the agency entered into a contract almost 2 years ago now. We canceled that contract and then actually opted to go through a process through DIR to receive InfoSec assessments for the COGS that would get direct billed back to the agency. The LBB requires us to do 5 assessments every year. So as of today, we actually have 7 regions that have completed cybersecurity assessments. So we are over the mark for this year. The chart you're looking at here only has 4 because that is within the previous quarter. Since then, we now are up to 7, and we have 6 that are still pending for completion, most likely by the end of the calendar year. This has been a priority since I came to the agency and as they expressed through the commission, and I'm really excited to see the COGS make progress on this. I realize these assessments are by no means easy. They require work to do, and then on the remediation side, it's an ongoing process. So, cybersecurity is in the news, I feel like almost every day. They talk about cybersecurity hygiene. It's something that we need to work on a daily basis and be mindful of. Because there's true impact. We had one region have their 911 system go down last summer. So these are things that actually happened. It's critical infrastructure that bad actors are looking to exploit. Besides that, all of our performance measures are pretty much on track. We had 100% time of 911 services available. 911 calls received during the quarter. We had about 638,000, which puts us at almost 1.8 million for the year. Same thing on the poison side. We maintained services 99.9% of the time. Calls processed for the quarter was about a little over 100,000 for an annual mark of about 194,000, which brings our average cost per call to $25.37. There's one thing I kind of want to point out here is the number of reported outages that exceed 2 hours. You can see here that our quarter we had 60 outages reported, which brings our mark up to 150, which is over the target of 100. Again, these are typically fiber cuts and things of that nature that the program kind of has to react to and are a little bit out of our control. Any questions on those?
No, but I do want to point out, you and I were talking about this and the number of exceedances, and I know that's beyond our control in most cases. However, I want to point out, and we were talking about the program percent of 911 services available. So that's just indicating that redundancy is working for us, and they're doing a great job on that. So thank you for all that put the redundancy in place, because we are certainly having 911 services in the state of Texas, even with these outages.
Yes.
I do have a quick question when we look at those outages, though, and it goes beyond us here. So we're covering X percentage of the state's population, the majority of the land mass. You've got districts, though, that I assume are encountering these same issues. Mm-hmm. Do they keep up with that as well? I think it might be interesting at some point if we could combine our data with maybe some of the districts to look at that, to kind of give a better statewide impact of, because those, we see a lot of it in my part of the country with people digging and not knowing where they're digging. But I think there may be a little bit bigger issue there, plus when you bring in some of those larger populations. Mm-hmm. And it might be interesting just to be able to have that number, that we could share that, in a year and a half or so.
Yeah, we could definitely work with the Alliance to see what's feasible there. We do work closely with TDM, then the State Operations Center, so there will be outages that get reported to TDM that are within district jurisdiction. So outages are reported, but yes, they're just not always, they're never actually recorded in ours if it's an ECD.
Gotcha.
Andrew, do you know how we came up with the annual target of 100? I mean, was there any studies that suggested that this is where we need to be? And I mean, you don't need to answer that now, but that would be a question if you know. But it's kind of like, is that a realistic number, or was it a number that was just put out there to track?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just obviously, I don't have the history on why we ended up at 100. The targets are actually given to the agency through the Legislative Budget Board as part of our strategic plan and LAR process. So it's a little bit of a give and take between this is what we think our measures should be and the LBB saying this is what your measures are. But yeah, how that number got picked, it's been like that for years. But that is something that we could probably have a good conversation around as we start our strategic planning process in the winter.
Right, absolutely,
Yeah.
because 150 seems like a lot, but with the growth of Texas, I mean, is that number a realistic number still today? Thank you.
A good point.
Okay. Any other questions for Andrew? If not, Lorraine. Now, keep in mind, Lorraine, that you've got 2 agenda items, and Andrew has told us a bill passed that we can ask you for any information that we want.
Sir, I'll answer any questions.
There you go. The appropriation year 2025 financial update.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name's Lorraine Meek, your Chief Financial Officer. Please join me on page 8 of the Commission meeting notebook, and we will go over the budget status as of June 30th. And as of that date, 83% of the year is lapsed. And here is our information. We're going to start at the top with the expenditures, and you'll see that the appropriations are showing as 80.6 million. Hasn't changed from the last report, and that is comprised of 64 million, which is provided to us in the GAA, the General Appropriations Act, and 16 million that's UB'd over from the prior fiscal years into 25 for the grants, which majority of them are 911, and 788,000 of it is for the poison grants. Of the amounts expended and accrued, that is again based on the strategic plans for the poison program, the 911 program, and our administrative contracts and payables in general, which leaves us a balance of $2.7 million of our appropriations that are available for additional actions, which we'll hear about later on in the commission meeting notebook. Of that available balance, 3% of it is related to the 911 program. And of that, I say 3%. Of the available balance, which is 3% of the total appropriation, 90% of it is the 911 program, which is the 2.445. Now we're going to go to revenues. I'm going to start with the middle column, total revenues column, and it shows almost $1.1 million in prepaid wireless service fee, $20.1 million in regular wireless, and then $3 million of landline services for a total of almost $24.2 million of service fees. Additionally, we have 13.6 in equalization surcharge for a total of $37.8 million. And in total, those revenues reflected are 13.4% million dollars less than the appropriation, which shows how we utilize our fund balance to help fund the current year. Now, as we speak to the total receipts, which is 2/3 down the page, the comptroller's biennial revenue estimate was updated in January, which shows they estimate for our two general revenue dedicated funds to bring in $50.2 million for the year. So far, we've brought in 37.8. And so that BRE to date times 83% would be 41.6 million. So it shows that we are under in revenues by 3.8 million. And I will say, as I was compiling this information, it was noted that our revenues for May and June for equalization surcharge were not reflected. We are in conversations with the comptroller as to what's going on with that. And hopefully with our September commission meeting, it'll say 100% and we have all those funds. Because if you recall from the last commission meeting, we were pretty darn close, if not a little more revenues received than what was the BRE to date. So informational for you guys. Now regarding the fund balance, surcharge is still estimated that by the year end, it'll be decreased from what we started at 2025, what we ended with 2024, as we budgeted to use all the revenues that we were estimating for the year. And then our service fee is estimated to increase in 25 due to prior year lapses and having access to general revenue use for our grants as well. So this is informational, but you may ask any question and I am happy to answer.
Any questions for Lorraine?
Just one. So you mentioned that we did not receive a receipt from the comptrollers. The question is, did we not receive a receipt, or the receipt that we received is in question?
So I was shown here's the amount that was received. Okay. There are some transactions that were processed that had reduced the amount to where none is being reflected on this report. So I am in talks with them to ask, hey, can I get that detail as to what is making up those transfers so I could provide better information for y'all and an understanding for ourselves.
All right. Well, remember, the last couple times you told us we would make up this difference. So
exactly.
You're kind of on the line here, Lorraine.
I am.
hate to tell you, but all right. Well, we appreciate your update there. Hope your conversations go well with the comptroller's office. We'll move on to our annual consideration of rates set for Regional Landline Commission 911 emergency service fee and the statewide equalization surcharge, also with Lorraine.
Yes, sir. If you can please look to the right. On page 9 is the annual consideration of rate sets for the Regional Planning Commission 911 emergency service fee for landline and VoIP and the statewide equalization surcharge. Per Rule 255.1, the Commission must annually review and adopt by order 911 emergency service fee and equalization surcharge. Service fee is currently set at the maximum of 50 cents per non-exempt line, and this rate has not changed since inception. Surcharge is currently set at 6 cents per month per non-exempt line with the maximum rate of 10 cents. Starting at the top of page 10, next page. The first table reflects the surcharge and service fee revenue for 2024. and that reflects almost $53.3 million. And the second table shows what we're estimating for 2025 service fee and surcharge revenue to come in about $51 million. This estimate shows that these funds can only fund a portion of what we need to maintain the current level of the 911 service programs and continue the completion to next gen 911. And the remainder will come from the fund balance and general revenue. On page 12 of the notebook, it shows what the past 12 months, so it's for the period of May 2024 to April 2025, of surcharge revenue being $24.2 million. And this analysis, the table below, reflects that as we remain at 6 cents, we will just generate a little over net zero of $244,000 of revenue. If we decreased it to 5 cents per non-exempt line, we would be underfunding by $3.8 million of revenue. So with this information, staff recommends the landline VoIP 911 fee continue to be set at 50 cents for fiscal year 2026 for the entire state 911 program service area. Staff recommends the statewide equalization surcharge continue to be set at 6 cents per month per non-exempt local exchange access line, equivalent local exchange access line, and non-prepaid wireless telecommunication connection. A draft order consistent with staff's recommendation rates have been provided to the Commission's presiding officer for signing. I am here for any questions.
I do have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're basing this on our current setup here, and that if we leave the surcharge where it's at, leave it the same, that it actually generates just a little bit more than last year, but if we set it lower, it would generate significantly less. So
Correct.
that's the deal there. But at the same time, going back to your financial update, if we look under revenues and we look at where most of that shortfall is, it's all under equalization surcharge.
Correct.
So I guess my question is, as you came up with these numbers, and I'm not saying this like, oh, let's raise the equalization surcharge. I'm just saying, in our projection, how confident do we feel about that given what's happened on surcharge?
I will point out regarding the rule, which I'll just hold there, is that it says we cannot, even though we have up to 10 cents to set the rate, you're not allowed to generate more revenue than you did the prior year. So I'm thinking hopefully that it can be reviewed to take that limitation out of it. However, I will say, looking back on the financial status report, we are in conversation with I will say, this has not happened where there's nothing been reflected for any of the months.
I get the rule.
Yes.
I get the rule and what you're saying there. I'm just saying, if you look at the past year collection, it's significantly down.
Yes.
Okay.
We're confident that the issue that we're having with the CPA is going to get addressed.
Right.
For whatever reason, collections into that account stopped, I think, in May. They
Correct.
haven't made any deposits in there. Okay. So we think it's just more of an accounting reconciliation issue that just needs to get addressed. But that's why you're seeing a difference there, is because we haven't received any deposits in that account since May.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Wasn't trying to be difficult. Just
No.
wanted to make sure.
You're good.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion for us to set the current rates on wireless at 50 cents and our equalization surcharge at 6.
Muscat, motion to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Washington second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. All right. Lorraine, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you.
Gentlemen.
And we will move on to Noah, who is going to provide us an update on our Next Generation 911 Service Fund and our federal grant program, as well as Proposition 8.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Noah Gilliam. I'm the Director of Contracting and Purchasing for the Commission on State Emergency Communications. I'm here today to give you a combined report for both SB8 and Proposition 8. You will notice throughout the staff report that there's very little information for Prop 8. Most of the funds have been dispersed. So there's not really a update per se on the funding, but there is an update on what the funding is doing. So I want to turn your attention to page 15 in your notebook for just going over the status. So just a few numbers to throw out here. We're at 71% of the time for SB8 elapsed, but we've expended 73% of the funds. So we're ahead of the curve now. That equates to about 109 million of that 150 that we've reimbursed. As you get towards the end of the table here, we have a couple of items to note. You'll notice that there is some funds that are marked as unallocated. So we did an internal analysis of some of the internal functions that we've been charging to the grant, such as indirect expenses, trying to come up with what we would spend those funds for, plus some personnel changes that we've made as far as how we're charging personnel to the grant. And some others that were just left undone. So what we've done is we've removed those from the current allocation. You'll notice some additional staff reports from programs to address that, to get that back into the pot. And the plan is to redistribute those funds back within the 911 state program. Any questions as far as funding is concerned before we move on to the progress that these funds have made for NG 911? Okay, moving on. We're doing really well. So our goal that we set for ourselves was the maturity state of intermediate. That is primarily because of the FCC, ongoing FCC about getting to end state is pretty difficult right now. So we actually are at 70% of all of the entities, the 911 entities within the state, at that intermediate maturity state. And attachments 2 and 3 will show you the overview plus the actual detailed report of where everybody currently sits. Any questions there before we move on to the next section? Perfect. All right. As far as back in March, I did give a report as far as an exercise we undertook for obligation. We had that deadline of December 31st. 2024 to obligate all funding within the program. And we noted a couple of folks who were not going to meet that deadline or had not met that deadline. So we worked on a case-by-case basis with these individuals. I'm happy to report that the majority of the folks here have met their new deadlines that we established for them, all except for the city of Ennis. And we're currently coordinating with them, with the selected vendor for their EZNet services, to try to see if we can't get that ball rolling here soon. Any questions? Okay. And then the last section we have here is on our grant compliance monitoring. And so I'm happy to report that we have completed monitoring in RPCs, and we're currently under review of 14 selected districts for this period. So we have had no findings, I will say, only recommendations for inventory maintenance worksheets, just how they record, just the federal government has certain requirements of what to keep on your inventory. Other than that, I'll be happy to provide a more detailed report on what we may find through the district monitoring at the next meeting in September. This information is informational only, but I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all may have.
Any questions for Noah? Noah, it's a great report. I particularly like your attachment number 2 on page 23. I think that tells the story. That's an excellent deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to Kenny now. Kenny, you're first up with number 5, rulemaking. Consider for publication initiating the statutory review of chapters 252, administration, and 253, practice and procedures. And we'll let you go on. I don't want to read all that. It's too
Sounds
much.
good. Good morning, Commissioners. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to formally address the Commission since I joined in January. So I just want to say a quick thank you to you and to Andrew for allowing me to join such a great team, doing such important work for the state of Texas. I am looking forward to carrying that torch from my predecessor, Patrick Tyler, perhaps with just a bit more brevity. Now, onto this agenda item, page 27. Government Code 2001, section 2001.039 generally requires a state agency to review its rules every 4 years. We do that on a chapter-by-chapter basis here at the Commission. We've reached the 4-year mark again for chapters 252 and 253. Both of those chapters were reviewed in 2021. Both were readopted without modifications at that time. I'm going to discuss Chapter 252 first, which is what appears on page 27. We have initially determined that each of the rules in there remain valid and the reasons for adopting them continue to exist. For several of those rules, as we've noted there in the background and the status, they are required by statute. 252.2, for instance, relates to purchase of goods and historically underutilized businesses. 252.3 deals with employee sick leave pools. 252.8 deals with the Emergency Communications Advisory Committee, ECAC. There are some other rules in this chapter that help us give clarity on implementing our controlling statute. It's Health and Safety Code, Chapter 771. The big one, we've kind of touched on some of this, but the big one, 252.1, defines state government as that term is used in section 074 of chapter 771, which is important because that states that 911 fees may not be imposed on state government, and there has been confusion over the years as to whether that applies to local governments. So we have to define it in rules so there's no confusion on that point. I have noted in here that there are some rules we've identified for potential changes. Those changes will appear once we propose any amendments, but first we obviously want to get comments from our constituents, from anybody interested in submitting comments on the rules in their current state before we suggest potential changes. Predominantly, those are going to be cleanup, updates to language that just hasn't been touched in many years. So therefore, if you will turn to page 29, you will see our proposed notice. That's the formal document that would get submitted to the Texas Register. My recommendation is for the Commission to initiate our required 4-year review of Chapter 252 by approving this notice for publication in the Texas Register. And I'm happy to answer any questions before that.
Kenny, you've got one agenda item here, but then there's 2 pages in the book. Do you want these separately, or do you want us to do them together?
We can do 252 first and then 253, just in case you have any questions or recommendations that apply to one and not the other.
Okay. Y'all have heard Kenny's request on submitting the enclosed notification to the Texas Register on Rule 252. Are there any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Muscat, motion to approve.
May 2nd.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. Good job, Kenny. All right. Chapter 253.
Excellent. So this one, page 30. As with Chapter 252, for Chapter 253, which is the practice and procedure chapter, we have determined each of the rules in there remain valid. The reasons for adopting them continue to exist. All 5 of these rules are required by law. They relate to things like public petitions for rulemaking, the process for negotiated rulemaking if CSEC elects to go that route, certain processes related to procurements and contracting. Once again, we have highlighted a few that we anticipate updating, bringing that language up to date, clean up, if you will. But once again, we intend to seek public comment so that we can consider those comments before we do publish any proposed changes. So accordingly, you can turn to page 31 to see our proposed formal notice of the Commission's intent to review the rules in Chapter 253 and our request for comments on the rules in their current state as part of that. I recommend that the commissioners initiate the required 4-year review of Chapter 253 by approving this notice for publication in the Texas Register.
All right. Kenny, you almost had me because it had protest procedures, and I got excited. And then Andrew shot that down that's just in contracting. So lost interest all of a sudden. All right. Y'all have heard the recommendation from Kenny. Are there any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve Chapter 253's publication to the Texas Register.
Mitchell move approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Gross seconds.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. Kenny, thank you. We appreciate you.
Great. You're not getting rid of me that easy, though. I got the next one, too.
Oh, that's right. We do. Well, you confused me because you put a 2 for 1 there.
Yeah.
I gotta
I'm
give
just
you
trying to
that.
be efficient. I'm trying to get you to lunch.
That's pretty clever. I like it. All right. Next item.
Yes, sir. This item relates to the FCC's annual 911 information collection. This is for calendar year 2024. This is an informational item. I'll just get that out of the way up front, so no action is going to be required from the commission here. I'm just going to kind of provide a quick overview and answer any questions you may have. CSEC has completed this annual information collection for the state of Texas for many years now. This is part of the Net 911 Act of 2008, which Congress created out of concern about reports of diverting 911 funds for non-911 purposes. And so they directed the FCC to start providing an annual report regarding the usage of 911 funds, including any diversions by state or local entities. Since future laws, future funding could be tied to these reports or at least take them into account, we obviously want as complete and accurate information as possible on these. And we also want to make sure the FCC knows that when it comes to the state of Texas, both participants in the state program and the ECDs, there is no diversion of 911 funds occurring that would violate those statutory prohibitions. I do want to quickly acknowledge and thank the jurisdictions that assisted me in providing their responses. We understand how time-consuming this is to compile this data each year. It's a thankless task, as my predecessor Patrick always harped. I specifically want to thank Kelly Hall from Highland Park and Patrick Corley from Brazos County ECD for their efforts to get as many of the districts as possible to provide a response. Last year, we were missing responses from 19 ECDs of 57 at that time. This year, we got that number down to 10 of 56. So that improvement would not have been possible without their hard work. So I wanted to make sure to acknowledge that, and we'll continue to try to whittle that number down going forward. And on the CSEC side, Lorraine and Heather Barnes are also crucial in compiling the state's data. So now I'll just turn to a couple of the bullet points. If you'll look in the status section, I've listed, I think, 5 kind of key points that I called out. I do want to talk on a couple of those. First, this likely comes as no surprise, but costs and volume are both up compared to last year. But I'll point it out just to confirm what you likely all expected. The second one, I know the commission always wants to keep an eye on numbers like this, and I did note that the revenue had gone down, revenue reported by about $36 million from the year before. That obviously was a data point that stuck out to me as well. My first time compiling this report and digging into that data point, we identified that one of the larger ECDs reported a much larger wireline revenue number last year. It was $47 million reported in calendar year 2023 versus $12.7 million this year. So you can see that's a significant difference. And so looking back at calendar year 2021 and 2022, that particular ECD reported 15.9 million and 15.8 million. So the 12.7 million that we saw for this calendar year is much more in line with the trend that we've seen there. So hindsight being 2020, I think perhaps last year's number was an outlier. I can't speak to whether that was a mistake or represented some type of influx in revenue, but I would point to this number being likely more accurate given what we can see in previous calendar years. And notwithstanding that difference in revenue, I think the survey with our increased number of responses or percentage of responses does a good job of painting the landscape of the 911 costs and revenues, and most importantly, the usage of those 911 funds across the state. So we'll continue to do our part annually to report as complete and accurate data as possible. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just one comment.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the prior year revenues that were higher because of one district. Sometimes they'll report their total revenue number accidentally that includes the wireless. They just sometimes look at the wrong column.
Yeah, entirely possible. In fact, going back and looking at that number, initially I thought that was the total because it was such a large number. But they did report those other numbers separately, so you may be correct that was just what happened, and we didn't catch that mistake last year in compiling all the ECD's data.
Okay, thank you.
One thing, and I guess this is probably more about the reporting and the form that the FCC has laid out here, but I noticed that they've segregated because we don't include the text to 911 in the overall call volume numbers. But that was a pretty significant increase in the text to 911.
And I believe the tracking of text to 911 varies across the different entities, so we don't always get a complete picture on both volume and revenue costs on that front.
Yeah, it's not that the FCC doesn't ask for it, just a question of whether you can really report it all.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions?
Excellent.
Good job, Kenny.
Thank you, sir.
You keep it up like this, and someday you'll be Bulldog Kenny.
All right. I look forward to it.
All right. Next up, we have Becky on our Regional Plan Commission Strategic Plan Amendments.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Becky Cooley. I'm a 911 Program Manager. Please turn to page 34 for the federal funding allocations. At the July 2022 open meeting, the Commission allocated $21.5 million in NextGen 911 core services and NextGen 911 equipment to the RPCs. Additional funding was allocated at the July 2023 open meeting in the amount of $4 million, at the May 2024 meeting for $3.3 million, and the March 25 meeting for $500,000. Staff has reviewed and adjusted the agency's allocation, freeing up funds for allocations to the RPCs as follows. ArcTex for $128,258, and then Panhandle and Texoma $257 each. All allocations are for the NextGen core services. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the strategic plan request for additional funding as presented in the staff report and authorize its executive director to revise and execute with each of the affected RPCs the recipient's 911 cost summary.
Are there any questions for Becky? If not, we would entertain a motion to approve those plan amendments and authorize Andrew to execute those agreements with those RPCs.
Washington motion to approve and authorize as stated.
Is there a second?
Let's,
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right, Becky, we're on to the next one, which is Regional Planning Commission Strategic Plan Amendments Request for Additional Funding.
Correct. If you will please turn to page 36 for requests for additional funding. In anticipation of procurements for call handling replacements in the next fiscal year, staff has initiated 5 requests to amend approved strategic plans for fiscal year 25 with requests for general revenue. And these include Deep East Texas in the amount of $264,322, Middle Rio Grande in the amount of $36,561, Nortex in the amount of $215,006, Southeast Texas in the amount of $1,360,397, and Texoma in the amount of $578,714. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the strategic plan amendment request for additional funding as presented in the staff report and authorize its executive director to revise and execute with each of the affected RPCs, the recipient's 911 cost summary.
Sorry. Any additional questions for Becky?
So when you have this additional pot of money, how do you go about, are these like in order of prior request, or how do these come about?
It mostly ties back to their equipment replacement schedule. So each region submits to us a 10-year equipment replacement schedule. So we're going to be looking to prioritize those costs based off of the year that they're due up for replacement. Some of these, so this pot that we're giving away right here is the remainder of the general revenue that we got for this biennium. So we need to obligate it prior to 9/1, otherwise it would lapse back to the state. So some of this is covering costs that are in their equipment replacement for this biennium, as well as front loading some that are actually in next biennium.
Okay. But this was staff-driven recommendation?
Yes,
Thank you.
based off of what they told us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any additional questions? All right, is there a motion?
Crowe makes a motion for the strategic plan amendment request for additional funding and authorize the executive director to revise and execute the contract.
Is there a second?
Mitchell second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right, Becky, you're up again. Regional Planning Commission Strategic Plan Amendments, Request for Use of Revenue.
Please turn to page 38 in your notebooks for the use of revenue request. Staff is in receipt of 2 plan amendments requesting use for revenue for fiscal year 2023 and 2025. Central Texas Council of Governments has announced their intention to create an emergency communications district on or about August 31st, 2025. CSEC staff will work with Central Texas on their withdrawal from the state program as required by PPS 37. The request for use of revenue for Bell County will close out funding for the applicable appropriation years. Staff has evaluated the amendment request and determined that it complies with the commission rules and policies, and it is eligible for expenditures by local agencies, requires no additional funding, and is cost-effective and necessary in establishing and operating a PSAP. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the request to amend a strategic plan to authorize the use of revenue for appropriation year 2023 in an amount not to exceed $990,000 by Central Texas as presented in this report, and approve the request to amend a strategic plan to authorize use of approval of one request to amend a strategic plan to authorize use of revenue for appropriation year 2025 an amount not to exceed $995,000 by Central Texas as presented in this report.
All right. Any questions for Becky? If not, I would entertain a motion.
must get motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Mays second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nobody got a fruit basket in return for this. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. All right, Becky, on to the next one. Regional Planning Commission strategic plans for fiscal years 2026 and 2027, your 10-year equipment replacement schedule, and authorization and delegation of authority to award contracts to the RPCs.
Please turn to page 44. Staff has reviewed the 19 RPC Stage 2 plans. As previously mentioned, Central Texas is in the process of creating an emergency communications district and did not submit a strategic plan. The submitted plans maintain the current level of 911 service being provided by RPCs in their respective regions. Proposed allocations are based on the following factors. 911 service fees are allocated based on statutory formula. Equalization surcharge and general revenue are allocated by the Commission as needed to operate and maintain current 911 service levels when service fee allocations are insufficient. 16 of the 19 RPCs are proposed to receive equalization surcharge and/or general revenue. While the Commission historically keeps a reserve of $250,000 per year for unplanned contingencies, the reserve is higher for the upcoming biennium due to the potential of 2 ECDs dissolving and joining the state program along with the departure of Central Texas. The revenue for fiscal year 26 is $3,512,736, and for fiscal year 27 is $3,462,116. The proposed 10-year equipment replacement schedule reflects the information required in Rider 3 of the Commission's fiscal year 2026 to 27 appropriation bill pattern, which requires the Commission to submit the 10-year equipment replacement schedule to the LBB and the Governor's Office not later than November 1st, 2025. Commission staff recommend that the Commission approve the 19 RPC regional strategic plans as submitted for the fiscal year 2026 to 2027 biennium, including the accompanying proposed RPC strategic plan allocations of appropriated 911 service fees, equalization surcharge revenue, and general revenue. Approve the proposed 10-year equipment replacement schedule for submission to the LBB and the Governor's Office, and authorize its executive director to award grants for 911 service which each of the 19 RPCs for the fiscal year 2026-2027 biennium consistent with its approved regional strategic plan.
All right, so approving our strategic plans for the RPCs for the next fiscal year. Any questions for Becky?
I've got one question. Just out of curiosity, on page 48, the 10-year equipment replacement, for Brazos Valley, their amounts seem lower than the other COGs over the 10-year period. Is that, do you happen to know why that's the case?
I do not.
Okay.
Andrew, provide some insight, please.
Yeah, not off the top of my head. We can follow up offline to figure out.
It seemed to stand out from the others, and I didn't know if that was maybe the way they do their CPE.
And it could very well be just how they license their equipment.
Could be in the cloud, maybe.
Yeah. And they may also have just gotten replaced in the current biennium, so you're not seeing some of those costs in the out years here. So I would guess it's probably an amalgamation of both those factors.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then we would entertain a motion to approve those strategic plans for the next fiscal year.
Scaro moves approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Muscat, second.
Any additional questions? If not, all those in favor say an aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right, Becky, this would almost be a record if it wasn't for James coming up behind you on poison control. Your 5th item up here, program policy statements, consideration of a revised PPS 39.
All right, finally, page 49.
51.
Program Policy Statement 039 outlines the requirements for RPCs when changing 911 service arrangements. The proposed changes to the PPS prohibit an RPC from reimbursing an OSP following the successful completion of a valid FCC Phase 1 request In alignment with the recent Phase 1 FCC report and order, in accordance with PPS 0, staff collaborated with TARC and the CSEC RPC 911 Program Operations Advisory Group to review PPS 39. The parties agree on the changes presented. Proposed PPS 39 is included as an attachment. Commission staff recommends that the Commission vote to adopt revised PPS 039, implementing changes to 911 service arrangements.
All right. Any questions for Becky? Essentially, this is a PPS brought around because of a change to FCC report. All right. Is there a motion?
Mitchell move approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Washington second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. All right. Thank you, Becky. We appreciate you. All right. Look, we're going to get Kenny back. Consideration for publication initiating the annual review of Commission Rule 255.4.
Thank you. Last one, I promise. So on page 52, you will see this is relating to our rule at 255.4, which defines a local exchange access line or an equivalent local exchange access line. The rule in its current state appears on pages 53 and page 54. This rule gives us a definition for those terms. Health and Safety Code section 771.063 requires us to have a rule defining these terms. And it also requires us to review that definition annually. So I mentioned earlier, most rules you review on a 4-year basis. We're statutorily required to review this one on an annual basis. These definitions are important because a different section of Chapter 771 imposes a 911 emergency service fee on local exchange access lines or equivalent access lines. Lorraine talked about that in an earlier agenda item. These definitions apply statewide. It's not just the state program, it's for ECDs as well. We, as I said, we review this every year. We last revised the rule in 2005 when VoIP and 911 became a requirement. For this go round, we once again do not anticipate proposing any changes to the definitions, but we are still required to first seek public comment on the rule and to consider any of those comments before adopting any changes or electing to leave it as is. So if you will turn to page 55, you'll see our proposed notice that will initiate that annual review of this rule. And I would recommend that the commissioners initiate our review by approving this notice for publication in the Texas Register.
Any questions? If not, we would entertain a motion.
Muscat motion to approve.
There's a
Rose
motion. Is there a
seconds.
second? There's a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right. Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Now we're going to move into poison control. And first up is Bryce talking about the migration update on the Texas Poison Control Network. And Bryce, I think this is your first time up at the mic. Congratulations.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Hello, commissioners. For the record, my name is Bryce Johnson. I'm the Texas Poison Control Network Manager. At the last meeting, Grace, the Director of IT, informed the Commission about the necessary migration away from Broadcom and VMware. Due to the end of the end of life notification received from the vendor, CSEC chose to migrate to Amazon Web Services GovCloud due to its scalability and ease of transition. CSEC staff worked with their IT managed service provider, W3IT, to migrate data and workloads to the Amazon Web Services GovCloud environment. CSEC staff coordinated with managing directors to plan the cutover to the new environment. On April 28, 2025, the Texas Poison Control Network successfully migrated to the new environment. The transition went smoothly, and there was no interruption to the call flow. CSEC staff continues to support and work with the regional poison control centers to improve and maintain the Texas Poison Control Network for the constituents and the residents of Texas. This is informational only and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Bryce? Well, congratulations. We're glad we got this done. I know that was kind of a surprise.
Yes, it was.
Surprise was a way to say that. But y'all managed to get it done, and you ended up saving money in the process, which
Yes.
is pretty damn amazing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
congratulations. Thank you, sir.
Alrighty.
All right, James, it's your turn. What a great name. Regional Poison Control Center Strategic Plan Amendments Request to Shift Budget Authority.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is James Johnson. And if you'll turn to page 57 in your notebooks, Commission staff is in receipt of 2 requests to amend strategic plans, shift budget authority for FY25. These shifts are for Texas Panhandle for $240,000 into from personnel to operations for public education, supplies, and building maintenance. Budget lines as detailed on page 59 of your notebook. Onto page 60, West Texas to shift $78,000 for personnel to operations also for public education activities. Staff has evaluated the amendment requests and determined that they comply with Commission rules and policies and are cost effective and appropriate in providing poison control services. Staff recommend the Commission approve the request to shift budget authority as presented in this staff report and subject to your questions.
I do have one question for you, James, on I say Amarillo, Panhandle, sorry, Center. I noticed that part of this is coming about because of the managing director position being open, as well as how are they coming on that?
Well, it's tough. Unfortunately, I wouldn't say unfortunately, Texas Tech has requirements for the 10% of this managing director position that is not related to the poison control services. So the effect is that they restrict the pool that they can choose from. A lot of people that have the education credentials are not willing, to relocate to Amarillo. That could be, or that is some of it. They've had several interviews and they've made offers, and for a combination of what they're offering, possibly the individuals are declining. So does that answer your question?
It does. The concern that I have about it is that we've had this come up several times about consolidation of poison control centers, and we've tried to maintain but I think that center being a smaller center, a lesser call volume, their inability to find a new managing director and keep those 5 positions filled out kind of puts a bullseye on them. And I hate to see that because they're one of the toxicology programs that benefit us through this program. So it's concerning to me, and that's just editorializing on my standpoint, but I worry about that center.
Yeah, and we will keep you apprised of the status of their search. As of today, speaking with the acting managing director in Amarillo, she seems pretty confident that they might have one now. That's possibly going to be willing to relocate to Panhandle and accept what they're offering, but that hasn't happened as of today.
Okay. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to put that off on you. Just that was a concern that I have. All right.
Yeah, that's something that we talk about too internally in CSEC, and we talk about that also.
Any additional questions for James? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve those strategic plan requests to shift budget authority within our regional poison control centers.
Mays, motion to approve.
Motion, second.
Washington, second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right, James, number 3 here, Regional Poison Control Center Strategic Plan Amendments unilateral reduction of allocation.
Thank you, sir. So this is going to be on page 61. The commission is authorized by statute to enter into contracts for services with each of the regional poison control centers. These contracts also offer the ability for each poison center to carry forward unexpended balances and funds from the first year of the biennium to the second. Commission does not maintain a funding reserve for the poison control program. Any budget shortfalls must be addressed within the program's appropriation. In April of this year, Commission staff, in collaboration with the San Antonio Poison Center, completed an analysis of expenditures and determined that there will be a minimum budget surplus of $102,335. Accordingly, staff recommend that the Commission approve the unilateral reduction of San Antonio's grant for FY25 in the amount of $102,335. Additionally, that the Commission authorizes the Executive Director to complete a unilateral amendment to the core contract, and that San Antonio revise its strategic plans for FY 2025. I know I said a lot of stuff just now, but essentially the next staff report is gonna, we're gonna take the funds from San Antonio and then shift them to another center to Central Texas. But subject to your questions.
Any questions for James on this one? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mitchell move approval.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Kathy Squirrell seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right, James, to the next one, Regional Poison Control Center Strategic Plan Amendments, a request for additional funding.
Thank you, sir. This is going to start on page 63. Commission staff proposes to utilize the $102,335 in funding reduction from San Antonio and allocate it to Central Texas to meet its deficit and personnel costs for FY 2025. The strategic plan amendment for Central Texas has been received and is in order. Staff has determined that this request is in compliance with Commission rules and policies, and as such, that the Commission approve the allocation of additional surcharge funding in the amount of $102,335. Additionally, staff recommends that the Commission authorize the Executive Director to execute an amendment to Central Texas Poison Host Institution contract to reflect the increase in funds for FY 2025. Subject to your questions.
Questions for James? If not, would entertain a motion.
Hayes, motion to approve.
There's a motion, is there a second?
On Washington, second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right. Now we're on to Regional Poison Control Center Strategic Plan Amendments, request for receipt of other funding sources.
Yes, sir. Turn to page 65. Commission staff is in receipt of one strategic plan amendment request to receipt of other funding source from the North Texas Poison Center, or NTPC. NTPC is requesting the approval to receive $47,338 for the operation of opioid addiction services referral hotline. If approved, these funds will be used for salary and fringe benefits for staff manning the hotline. Additionally, I should note that this hotline will not be interconnected with, nor will it use any of the TPC and IT resources. So this includes the any kind of maintenance, the help desk, the equipment, the telephony, circuitry, et cetera, et cetera. Commission staff has reviewed NTPC's request for a strategic plan amendment to determine it complies with the Commission rules and policies and is cost effective and appropriate in provisioning poison control services. Staff recommends the Commission approve NTPC's strategic plan amendment request to include additional funding source in the amount of $47,388 and grant authority for the Executive Director to complete the amendment to the contract with NTPC's host institution.
Any questions? Motion to approve.
Squirrell moves approval.
There's a motion. I think there's about to be a second.
Mitchell second.
All right. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right, James, last one here.
All right.
Regional Poison Control Center strategic plans for fiscal years 2026 and 2027.
Thank you, Commissioner. In May 2025, the approved state funding allocation in the amount of $23,976,095 was provided to the regional poison control centers for strategic planning. All RPCCs have submitted their strategic plan documents and are in compliance with Commission rules and policies. All services required to be provided have been identified and are summarized on page 67 of the notebook. On page 69, the table identifies the total budget for the entire poison program. The first 4 rows of the budget lines identify the funds to be used for personnel. Total costs for these are $29.8 million. And of those, $23.1 million are CSAC grant funds, which comprise 77.7% of the total RPCC budget for personnel. The remaining funds identified as other, which includes but is not limited to other grant sources or unreimbursed costs provided by the host institution. The remaining rows on the table identify non-personnel categories, which are unrelated to personnel costs. Just as in the personnel category, $1.4 million is budgeted, and of that, $805,371 are CSAC grant funds, which comprise 55.4% of the total RPCC budget for non-personnel. Also, just as in personnel, the remaining operations budget are provided by other funding sources. I'd also like to provide a little more detail on the table on page 70. In FY26, the personnel grant funds provide 96.5% of the total CSEC allocation of $11.9 million, and the remaining 4.5% for operations. In FY27, it's similar, 96.7% of CSEC grant for personnel, the remainder for operations. In total, CSEC grant provides 96.6%, or $23.1 million to personnel. Total allocation of $23.976 and $95. I should also note that in keeping with the FY 2018 and 19 practice, 100% of the CSAC grant funds were allocated to the 6 poison control centers for FY 26-27. So in other words, we don't maintain a reserve for the poison control program. Staff will actively monitor the reimbursements requests and ensure costs and utilization stay on target, and to facilitate consistency and maximize the use of those funds. Commission staff recommends the approval of the 6 regional the regional strategic plans as submitted for FY 26-27, and the allocation of CSAC grant funds to the RPCCs for the purposes outlined in the approved strategic plans, totaling $23,976,095. Lastly, the Commission authorized the Executive Director to award grants for poison control services in each of the 6 RPCCs for FY 26-27. That's subject to your questions.
Any questions for James? Thank you for your work on this. I think the last agenda item and this one is important for us to always remember that those poison control centers, while we do put a lot of money into them, there is a lot of outside funding that is making this program happen, and I think that's always significant to recognize their efforts there. So we thank them. If not, I would entertain, if there's not any additional questions, I would entertain a motion to approve those strategic plans for regional poison control centers.
Motion to approve as stated, Washington.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mitchell.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right. At
Thank
this
you.
time, that concludes our commission's open meeting agenda items. We do have one item for an executive session